Hi, I'm just trying out this recording for the first time, and I thought it would be really fun to try out some of these tube watercolor paints. If you've ever tried these, you might know that they're a little bit more challenging to deal with than our regular palette paints. And I'm going to try some darker colors and just to see how they come out. Now, you might have a totally different watercolor set than I do, but any similar color will be fine for this test. This is called viridian. Let's see if we can zoom in on that. Viridian just means a type of green. All right, I'm going to use some of this viridian. It looks very, very dark. And I'm going to put some on my palette. There is a tiny bit of separation when I squeezed it out for the first time. That's probably normal. I just bought these watercolor paints today at my local Michael's Art and Craft. You might have a similar art store near you, or you might order them from the internet. There's a ton of options. In addition to my paint palette and my tube paints, I have watercolor paper that says watercolor on the packaging. That's sort of important because sometimes when we use watercolor paints, what happens is we think it's going to be good on any paper, but you really have to have paper that can hold and absorb the water. All right, other things that I have here are some paint brushes, and I have a detail brush, two different tapered or pointed round brushes. They're called round because the bristles are all around and not flat. And it's called tapered because it comes to a point. This is my 1/2 inch flat, which I use a lot. And it has a bit of a rectangle shape, and it gets very thin on this side and very thick on this side. All right. The most important thing for your watercolors is going to be water. Nice, clean, fresh water. And we're just going to do a little experiment with how our tube paints come out. I'm going to dip my brush directly into that water first. And then I'm going to put some water directly into this well. And you should see a little puddle forming. Use a bigger brush if you're not getting enough water on there. What I want to do is take just, oh, and this moving. I just want to take a little bit of that green and just start by pushing a tiny bit of green into that puddle. That's sort of a light color. And that's all the paint I want you to use as you get used to using the tube watercolor paint. So basically it should just look like a little green dot of water. Very, very different in color to the original here. I'm just going to turn it because I have a bit of a shadow. I want you to see it in the light. This looks very, very dark. And right here, this looks very, very light. Totally different. Now I just want to paint a little square on my paper and show you how light you can get that tube paint very, very easily. This is great for an underpainting. This is fantastic for the sky, some water, anything you want to do. That is a light color. Now I'm going to just take my brush, and again, I'm going to move this palette because I want to make sure it's in the that bubble of water is just moving around all by itself. It's so funny. Your bubble, move down. There we go. So I want to get this paint with us a little bit more. And you can see I'm not even putting my whole brush in. I'm maybe using just the top 1/10 of the brush. And I'm going to move more paint into that water and just swirl it around. Now look at that. That's a dramatically different color already. I'm going to put it on the paper and make another square. Now this looks like a great green color for like a grass or a lawn, bushes, leaf work, trees. So right now I have a very, very light color, a very medium color, and I'm going to do the same process again for the 3rd time, and just again take only a small amount of my brush and put it into the paint and then bring it into the water and swirl it around a bit. When I'm touching the paint, you heard me say only like the top tip. When I'm touching the bubble of water, I'm really pushing all the way down. Actually, I want to really soak my brush. I don't want my brush to feel dry at all. All right, and I'm going to make another square right here. These are actually sort of more similar than I thought they would be. That's really, really interesting. So we might have gotten to a point where we need a bunch more paint. And so I'm going to try that. I'm going to add just a bit more. I'm going to really kind of tap my brush in here and then really bring it in here. That's my cat. All right, now I'm getting that darker tone that I was looking for. And even though it's darker, it's still very, very wet. I'm not pushing around or moving around any thick paint at all. This is completely liquid. So I never want it to look like you're pushing like a thick piece of paint. Like if it was acrylic or oil paint, you might push around a thicker bit of paint. It should always be extremely liquid, just like as if it was an ink, even when it gets this dark. And that's probably about as dark as I will want you to take it with this color. And I want to just show you now the opposite. Now I have this dark color on my brush. And I'm just going to bring back my water, which looks very clean still. And I'm going to dip my brush into the water and you can see there's some green paint going in there. I'm just going to gently tap some extra water off the edge, but my brush is still very wet. And I should be able to go back to the medium green without ever putting my brush back on the palette. So you can go back and forth by using both the water on your palette and the clean water in your jar. Now it does get dirty after some amount of time. If you find it too dirty, do change your water frequently. So one more time, I'm going to dip it in here into the water jar. I'm going to tap the side just a little bit. And I'm going to try to imitate that first color. Let's see if I did it. All right, that looks pretty good. And then last, if you want to get more color here and you don't want to go back here, look at this pool of dark that I have right here. I can just take my brush and kind of dip it in and push it around. It makes this change a little bit. You can play with the placement of the little puddles in your square. And then I can go right here and just bring some of that paint back. So I'm getting some really nice options, both playing with the idea of how to get from light to dark, how to use your water here, and how to use your water just plain here. So that's pretty much it for how to get a really light tone from your tube paint. For every color, you might get a little bit of a difference. So the best advice that I can give you is to experiment. Practice this. Practice it with your blue. Practice it with your yellow and see if you can get a really light yellow. And also, as always, I always say practice mixing your colors too. All right. So that's it for making green squares and practicing with your tube paint. And see you soon. Thank you.